Hello everyone. We have been discussing about the water sustainability this week. We did talk about the basics of sustainability, and then what in the last couple of lecture we did talk about the Dublin statement, its various key points, and action agenda set in terms of Dublin statement. So, this is what we discussed. We will continue our discussion on to water sustainability, and in this particular class we will be talking about various viewpoints of sustainability, because if you follow the discussion on to sustainability, you must have realized that sustainability just is a very broad term. It is one of the most used term. It encompasses so many things that water has to be, in terms of water, if we talk about water, has to be safe for water has to be sufficient and safe for future generation as well. In addition, it talks about the and intra generation equities into the demand management or water provisions. So, when we talk about this sustainability, there are various different viewpoints. There are basically three particular pillars are considered for a sustainability, but before we go into that, there are three key elements to a sustainable water future. So, one of them is the resiliency, then efficiency, and then quality. So, your the efficiency of course talks about how efficient the water systems are in gross. Okay. So, it talks about the water supply system, efficiency of water supply system, efficiency of water treatment systems, efficiency of sewerage collection systems, efficiency of revenue generation or revenue collection systems, those things. The quality perspective talks about the quality of water, which talks about sort of health perspective, sanitation perspective, pollution perspective, environmental effects or environmental impacts, what kind of environmental impacts are being to be laden, these perspectives, while resiliency talks about from the quantity perspective onto the resources particularly. So, what are the water resources, what are the risks related to the like flood and droughts, water related disaster risk, then vulnerability of the water resources in terms of quantity particularly. Okay. So, all these are covered under the resiliency. There are basically it can be sub indexed as well. So, resiliency will have your water stress or water scarcity, what we call the green space, water related disaster risk, flood risk, water balance, water footprint, water reserves. So, all this will come in the sort of resiliency related this thing. Then in efficiency, then there is leakage management, leakage control, water charges, tariffs, service community, wastewater reuse efficiency, metering water, drinking water supply systems, pressure management systems, sanitation practices, all this will fall under the efficiency, while the quality of drinking water, the sanitary hygiene and quality of the sanitation systems, treated wastewater quality, water related diseases, water pollution, all this will fall under the quality perspective. Now, as we are saying that we will talk about the different viewpoints particularly. So, if you see, the sustainable development has three basic pillars, as basically is commonly said. So, there is a social viewpoint, there is the social pillar of the sustainability, then there is another pillar which is actually the environment. So, that needs to be taken care of or should be supportive in terms of environmental management, that is what sustainable development is. And then it has to be economically sustainable as well. So, the economic or terms also is one of the very important pillar of the sustainability. Now, it is interesting that if you see these overlaps over here, if you see these overlaps over here, so we have the social and environmental overlap is bearable, whereas social and economic overlap is equitable. Environment and economic overlap is viable, while if it is falling under all these three pillars, then only it is sustainable, the central part of the sustainability which you can see from this point. So, based on this, there are certain viewpoints, as we were saying initially. So, there is a economic viewpoints which talks about the economic feasibility. Okay. There is a different financial criteria as well, which we will talk about in a few minutes, but as an overall, there is economic feasibility has to be assessed. So, whether a system is economically viable, or if you talk about in terms of the resource generation, finance generation, so whether it is equitable or not. So, those kind of things are seen here. Then there is a social viewpoint which talks about the social responsibility of the water management systems, because eventually the water management systems has to benefit the society. So, how much efficient or how much effective it is in serving those social responsibilities is decides its social sustainability. For example, let us say a water supply has to be equitably distribute the water under the different section or subsection of the societies. Now, if we have a water supply system which is serving a particular group of people or particular type of particular income group of community and ignoring the other, it is not socially equitable and cannot be said to be socially sustainable system. Then there is a ecological viewpoint, which basically, or environmental viewpoint you can say, which talks about the environmental integrity. So, how much effective the system is in environmental maintenance. Okay. This is more has to do with the quality, of course, the quantity also will be an integrated part, but whether like we are degrading environment in terms of pollution, or in terms of, if you talk about the quantity. So, if we are extracting too much of water from resources which is hampering the ecosystem demands, so or ecological demands of water, then that is not environmentally sustainable system. So, these are the three, the environmental, social and economic are the three sort of generally considered pillars of sustainability. However, there is one more viewpoint which is often ignored, particularly because when we talk about the sustainable management or sustainable development, it usually goes to the policy makers, bureaucrats and those kind of people. They do give due importance to society or in maybe environmental perspective, financial perspective, economic perspective, but they often ignore the engineering viewpoint, which is very important in sort of sustainable management of services, in particular the water utilities. So, that is another very important viewpoint, which is your engineering viewpoint or technological viewpoint. You can say that whatever technology you are deploying in the field, because the water utilities needs and incorporates various technological aspects at various stages. So, for example, there would be with which technology you are abstracting the water from resource, whether you are pumping it, making it in the canal form, how you are doing, if you are pumping, what kind of pump you are using, whether you are going for centrifugal pump or FP pump. So, there are different types of devices, instruments, or in general sense, if we say there are various types of technologies available, which one you are picking. Okay. There are when you talk about the treatment aspect, again there is a variety of technologies available, starting from the very basic chemical treatment procedures to the most advanced reverse osmosis, or what typically we refer as RO systems. Okay. So, there is a variety of technology, each have its environmental aspects, each may be having its cost implication aspect, but so when there are various technologies available, what is the engineering viewpoint onto that particular technology in terms of sustainability, that also needs to be evaluated, considered, and should be given due importance. So, that is another essential component or essential pillar of a sustainable systems, that how efficient a technology or how sound the technology is that which you are using in terms of various aspects, as the multiple technologies could be available for starting from the water abstraction to water treatment to distribution to supply to resource generation, if you want to go for groundwater recharge or if you want to go for sort of put back into the system. So, how effective is your wastewater treatment, technologically effective, or how technologically sound is your wastewater treatment system is. All these things will sort of contribute towards the overall sustainability of the system, and that is why the engineering viewpoint is also one of the very important aspects of sustainable development or sustainable management of the infrastructure or of the systems. So, if you see the water policies generally pursue for multiple objectives, okay, and this then can be structured around 4 different dimensions. So, whenever a water policy is developed, it could have maybe one or in fact more than one of these major objectives, okay, in for the sustainable dimension. Of course, the objective of water policy will be maybe putting water to maybe providing water, the prime objective could be providing water to a community, okay, but that will fall under a social objective if you see here. So, there are 4 different frames of objective. There is one is environmental objective. So, whatever water policy you are developing, how helpful it is in fulfilling the environmental objective or the sustainable environment management. Okay. For example, if you are abstracting water from groundwater, what is the allowable limit to abstract water? You can make a policy onto that, seeing that it does not tend to deplete the groundwater level excessively. Okay. If you recall, the basic concept of sustainable says that water withdrawal should more or less be equal to the amount of water recharged in terms of quantity, in terms of quality both. So, that way your environmental objective should ensure that it is not hampering the environment. Then there is a financial objective, okay, how much revenue you can generate out of a system. Then there is economic objective, then which is likely to be the most rewarding program or most rewarding use or that kind of identification of those kind of opportunities from economic perspective would serve your economic objective. And then one has a social objective which sort of suggests that which as I was saying in the very beginning itself, that the social objective could primarily be the main focus of putting a water policy or putting a water utility or those kind of systems. Okay. For example, if you are trying to make a policy that okay, let us say you are having a transboundary river, this much of water is to be taken up, this is to be sent for irrigation, this much of water is to be sent for the industrial applications, this much of water would be for domestic application. So, this is primarily the social objectives. You are setting up, you are allocating certain amount of water for agriculture, which is again for in turn will eventually generate the livelihood for so many people, their sort of income depends on to that. So, how your water allocation can fulfill their expectation of irrigation water, okay, of that particular society, that particular community. The agriculture the people involved in the agriculture business, their community, or small agriculture people, their community. So what social benefits or what social objective your policy is fulfilling for them. You are allocating certain amount of water for industrial growth, so there is certain objective aside to that, that okay, you are expecting this much this particular rate of growth for the industries, or this particular industries to be set up at certain locations. So all those objective, it will be, there will be requirement of this much water, how much water you can allocate to them, how it can be efficiently used. So all that will fall under the again sort of, there could be a financial objective or economic objective involved in that, as well as we are saying that it is not that your objectives are independent of each other. A certain activity may be leading to fulfilling more than one objective. Okay, so there will be societal development, there will be financial recovery for allocating water to the industries. Okay, so that is maybe setting up your economic objective as well as social objective. Okay, then there is a domestic water supply systems or municipal water supply system, you can allocate for that certain amount. So that is another fulfillment of your basic fulfillment of social objectives. Now these objectives may at times support each other, but at times actually they may cause potential conflicts with each other. Okay. So we will talk about the conflicts, how they can support each other. We are just talking about, let us say you are allocating water to industry, so that is giving to your industrial growth, which is one, could be one of the social objectives, or maybe sort of if industrial growth is promoted in a certain region or certain town or certain area, it is going to be it is going to bring development into the community in many terms, in terms of productivity from that area, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of maybe higher per capita income. So all these things eventually may land up increasing or working in favor towards the development of the overall society, which could serve as a social objective. At the same time, it could serve sort of economic objective, that water sent to industries will be charged at a probably higher tariff as compared to the one that comes from the domestic circles. So that is going to probably serve your economic viewpoints as well. However, at times there would be conflicts as well. Okay, because if you are setting up certain amount of water, taking the same example, if you are setting up certain amount of water for industry, what if you are sacrificing on the environmental demand or ecological demand of water in case of limited water availability. So if let us say your resource does not have significant or does not have sufficient amount of water available, what eventually will happen to the ecological demand if you are putting water to the industry or other purpose. So there could be conflicts as well along with the along with your supportive support towards the support from one objective towards the achieving the other objective as well. So if you see the different components of these policy objectives, major policy objectives. Okay, so your environmental sustainability objective sort of discourages depletion of critical natural capital. Water is your critical natural capital. Now your this aspect, this environmental sustainability aspects, so environmental sustainability aspects says that water should be judiciously used so that the ecological or environmental sustainability is ensured. Now environmental sustainability means your water that you are taking out from the resource is not that much so that it can actually affect the ecology in gross terms. Okay. So for example, if you are taking if you are abstracting water from river, so that if you are abstracting too much of water from a river and the water left in the river is not sufficient to maintain the e-flow requirement, minimum environmental flow requirement, okay, for survival of aquatic ecosystems or for other environmental purposes. So, that means that resource is under severe threat and it is a non-sustainable practice. Okay. So, that has to be ensured. Then there is another aspect of the quality aspect. If you are putting polluted discharge into a water body in a quantity that it cannot sustain or it cannot deal with, then the quality of the water at your resource is going to be depleting day by day. Okay, that is another non-sustainable practice. So, the environmental sustainability aspect says that there has to be, in terms of policy, it guarantees the preservation of ecological functions of the natural water resources or natural water system. So, it encourage eventually the water saving from the community uses. So, because if your water demand is less, you will abstract less water. So, more is available for ecosystem uses or ecosystem purpose. So, it encourage basically the water saving from that perspective and discourage the wasteful water uses. So, wasting of too much of water uses or sort of unjudicial water uses. So, that needs to be discouraged, water should be saved as much as possible, okay, and this way it sort of minimize the alteration of natural flow pattern. So, your natural flow pattern should not be altered too much. Okay. The river is best in its pristine stages. So, kind of attempts should be made towards the maintenance of that stage. Then there is a financial sustainability which talks about the guaranteed long term reproduction of physical assets. Okay. So, this kind of compensates the resources that are used input the water related activities. So, it ensures the cash flow, cost efficiency and the cost recovery in financial terms. Then there is a economic efficiency which says or which suggests that water is to be allocated to the most beneficial use and economic resources are not to be wasted. So, water if you consider water as an economic resource and if you take the perspective from any economist, he will say that resource should be allocated or should be given to the section or to the society or to the community from where you get maximum return. Okay. That is its most beneficial use. So, the allocation wise, if you talk about the economic efficiency, allocation wise, that water should be allocated based on the priority to use the highest value for the water. Now, this highest value for the water is a very dicey term if you see. Okay. What is the highest value for the water? Maybe if you are giving water to the industries, they will pay the highest tariff because they are using that water for profit making. Their business is depending on the water. Let us say if for example a company, let us take example of Nestle, if Nestle is making a food product, it is requiring certain amount of water in the processing. Now, that water, if you supply that water to Nestle, Nestle will be able to pay much higher tariff for that water than if you provide that water to a middle income aged family group, or even if you a middle income group family can also pay some amount to the water services. However, if you provide the same water to another family or low income group family, so you are not expecting any return from them. So, that is not going to be the value or higher paying value in terms of water if you see independently, but the value to water is a different thing and value to society is a different thing. Okay. So, water allocation to industry may be highest highest return onto the water in terms of finance or in terms of capital, but water supply to the needy society people for their domestic uses is the highest value to the society. So, in economic efficiency, that is sort of a debate that what should be the priority allocation of the water. So, if you take the wholly economist perspective or economist view, it is said to have that water should go to the place from where you get the maximum return, but a societal perspective suggests that water should actually go to the most beneficial societal uses, and for societal uses or for the use of a society, the most beneficial or the most basic use of the water is to the fulfillment of the domestic demands. Fulfillment of the water demand for the purpose of drinking, for the purpose of cooking, for the purpose of maintenance of our body, or which is bathing and all this stuff. So, that is probably the most valuable or highest value use in terms of society. So, the cost of water management and water related services has to be compared, and then water considered as an economic resource should be allocated with proper regulations and proper tariffs. That is the economic efficiency objectives. And then under the social concerns, so adequate access to the affordable water at fair and equitable conditions is to be ensured. So, from society point of view, one needs to identify the different water needs of the society and allocate water in a way which is not skewed by the concentration of power. So, that means it basically talks about the equitable distribution, that water should be equitably distributed. It is not that if certain section is from the well to do family or have the more capacity to pay or that kind of thing, so they are entitled to get the more water. That concept is not like socially sustainable. Okay. So, for societal concerns, it has to be equitable distribution. So, the water needs to be assessed, maybe based on, there you can see that based on the standard of living, certain people needs this much of water, certain people needs this much of water. Now, a person living in a sort of large bungalow would obviously need more water even for cleaning and household activities as compared to the person which is living in a small slum. Okay. Per person water, if you see, you can the drinking demands would be similar. It can fairly be assumed that drinking demands are similar, maybe cooking demands more or less you can consider similar though, but then there are cleaning demand, gardening demands, maintenance demands, all that will again depend on the area occupied, and this kind of stuff as well come into the picture. So, the water needs, societal water needs is to be assessed carefully, and then distribution has to be accordingly. It is not based on the sort of power politics and all those things. The tariff structure should be so that the lower income users can also have access to the minimum quantity or the expected quantity or the quantity which is being given to the, which should be provided to them under their rights to water and sanitation acts. So, that much amount of water should be available at lower tariff or based on their income and all these aspects to the people or to the lower income groups of the society as well. And then cost sort of again will be try to put into the perspective that when how much cost recovery is to be done from which sector, and how equitable way of cost management can also be ensured in a society. So, those kind of policy objectives are to be set for the sustainable management of water, and based on these objectives one has to frame the policy and implement those into the field from different perspective. As I was saying that these policies at times brings too many conflicts, and that is what we will be discussing in the next lecture onto the conflicts. Thank you.